Hey everyone! This is a quick reminder to subscribe and hit that like button. It lets me know that you are enjoying my content. Also, feel free to drop your suggestions for future stories in the comments below. Thank you for listening, and let's dive right in. The Aegean sun beat down on my face, a welcome warmth after months of dreary English weather. Crete! Just the name conjured images of ancient myths, azure waters, and sun-drenched beaches. This trip, a belated celebration of my parents' 25th wedding anniversary, was our first real family vacation. I, Isabel, had just finished my first year of university, and the promise of escape, adventure, and endless buffet spreads was intoxicating. Our all-inclusive resort, the Poseidon's Embrace, a name that now seems darkly ironic, was everything the brochures promised and more. Whitewashed buildings cascaded down the hillside, overlooking a private beach where the water shimmered like sapphires. Palm trees swayed in the gentle breeze, casting dancing shadows on the manicured lawns. The air hummed with the happy chatter of tourists, the clinking of glasses, and the distant splash of someone diving into the pool. It was paradise. Or at least, it appeared to be. We checked in, our luggage whisked away by smiling staff, and were ushered to our suite. It was spacious and luxurious, with a balcony overlooking the sea. My parents were beaming, their faces flushed with excitement and relief. This trip, meticulously planned for months, was finally happening. "It's perfect, isn't it, darling?" Mum exclaimed, throwing her arms around Dad. "Absolutely perfect," he agreed, kissing her forehead. I smiled, a genuine smile that reached my eyes. It was good to see them so happy, so relaxed. The stress of their demanding jobs had been weighing on them, and this break was exactly what they needed. We spent the rest of the day exploring the resort, familiarizing ourselves with its labyrinthine layout. There were multiple pools, each with its own vibe, from the lively activity pool to the tranquil infinity pool that seemed to merge seamlessly with the horizon. Restaurants offered cuisine from around the world, promising a culinary adventure every night. There was even a small amphitheater where traditional Greek dances were performed. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, we settled into a poolside bar for a pre-dinner cocktail. The atmosphere was buzzing with energy. Families laughed together, couples strolled hand in hand, and groups of friends shared stories. It was a scene of idyllic holiday bliss. While my parents chatted about their plans for the week, a boat trip to Santorini, a visit to the Knossos Palace, I people-watched, observing the other guests. There was a loud group of Americans, easily identifiable by their brightly colored clothing and boisterous laughter. A young couple from France whispered sweet nothings to each other in a corner. And then there was the man who always seemed to be watching. He was sitting alone at a table a few feet away, nursing a drink. He was unremarkable in appearance, middle-aged, with thinning hair and nondescript features. But there was something about him that made me uneasy. His eyes, dark and intense, seemed to follow everyone, yet he never interacted with anyone. He just sat there, observing, a silent, watchful presence. I noticed a strange symbol etched into the stone near the edge of the pool. It was a series of lines and circles, intertwined in a way that seemed vaguely familiar, yet I couldn't quite place it. I took a mental note to look it up later, thinking it might be some ancient Greek symbol. I dismissed it as just a part of the resort's decoration. Later that evening, after a lavish buffet dinner that could have fed a small army, we strolled along the beach. The moon cast a silvery glow on the water, and the air was filled with the scent of salt and jasmine. My parents were holding hands, lost in their own world. I trailed behind them, feeling a sense of contentment. This was a good holiday, a perfect holiday. The next morning, we decided to join a safari tour to a remote waterfall, advertised in a brochure we'd picked up at the reception desk. It promised a scenic drive through the Cretan countryside, a visit to historical sites, and a refreshing dip in a natural pool beneath the falls. It sounded like the perfect way to experience the island's natural beauty. We met the other tour participants in the hotel lobby. There was the friendly couple from England we'd chatted with by the pool, a boisterous group of Italians, and, to my surprise, the quiet man from the bar. He didn't acknowledge anyone, simply stood apart, his gaze fixed on some distant point. He was on our Jeep. The safari jeep bounced along the dusty track, the open top offering panoramic views of the Cretan landscape. At first, the scenery was stunning. Rolling hills dotted with olive groves, vineyards stretching towards the horizon, and the shimmering blue of the sea in the distance. My parents were in high spirits, pointing out landmarks and reminiscing about their earlier travels. I tried to share their enthusiasm, snapping photos of the picturesque countryside, but the unsettling feeling from the previous day lingered. The quiet man from the hotel sat in the back of our jeep, his presence a constant, low-humming source of unease. He hadn't spoken a word since we set off, his gaze fixed on the passing scenery, a slight, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips. He continued to hum that strange, unsettling tune. It was a melody without words, a series of low, droning notes that seemed to vibrate in the air around us. Our guide, Dimitri, droned on about the history of the region, mentioning ancient Minoan settlements and the island's role in various wars. His voice was monotonous, as if he were reading from a script, and his eyes seemed distant, unfocused. He never made eye contact with any of us, his attention always elsewhere. The other tourists in our jeep, the friendly English couple, seemed to be enjoying the ride, chatting animatedly about their holiday plans. They tried to include me in their conversation, but I found it difficult to focus, my mind preoccupied with the strange atmosphere and the quiet man's unsettling presence. As we ventured further inland, the landscape began to change. The lush, vibrant greenery gradually gave way to a more rugged, desolate terrain. The rolling hills became steeper, the olive groves sparser, and the sea disappeared from view. The air grew heavy and still, the vibrant sounds of nature replaced by an unnerving silence. Even the usually ubiquitous cicadas were quiet, their buzzing replaced by an almost deafening stillness. It was as if we had entered a different world, a place where time stood still and the usual rules of nature no longer applied. Dimitri announced that we were approaching our first stop, a historical site, the ruins of an ancient temple dedicated to some forgotten deity. The temple, or what remained of it, consisted of a few crumbling walls and a scattering of stones. It was difficult to imagine that this desolate place had once been a site of worship, a place where people had come to seek solace and offer prayers. Now, it exuded an aura of decay and abandonment, a sense of something ancient and malevolent lurking beneath the surface. As we explored the ruins, I noticed that the strange symbol I had seen at the hotel was etched into several of the stones. It was a series of circles and lines intertwined in a pattern that seemed both familiar and alien. I tried to take a picture of it with my phone, but the battery had mysteriously died. I frowned, knowing I had fully charged it that morning. I mentioned the symbol to my parents, but they dismissed it as just another ancient carving, nothing to worry about. They were still caught up in the holiday spirit, determined to enjoy every moment, oblivious to the growing sense of dread that was creeping over me. After a brief stop at the ruins, we continued our journey, deeper into the heart of the island. The landscape became even more desolate, the silence more oppressive. The quiet man in the back of our jeep continued to hum his strange, unsettling tune, the melody weaving its way into my thoughts, amplifying my unease. I glanced back at him, trying to decipher the expression on his face, but his features remained inscrutable, his eyes fixed on some distant point beyond the horizon. Dimitri announced that we were approaching the trailhead for the waterfall. He warned us not to stray from the marked path, emphasizing the importance of staying together as a group. His words, spoken in his usual monotonous tone, seemed less like a warning and more like a recitation, a formality he had to go through. As we disembarked from the jeeps, I noticed that the air was thick with an unnatural stillness. There was no wind, no rustling of leaves, no sound of any living creature. The silence was so profound that it felt like a physical presence, pressing down on me, suffocating me. The trailhead was marked by a weathered wooden sign, its paint peeling and the lettering barely legible. The path leading to the waterfall was narrow and overgrown, winding its way through a dense thicket of trees. As we began our hike, I lingered behind, wanting to capture the beauty of the surrounding landscape with my camera. I took a few photos of the rugged terrain, the ancient trees, and the wildflowers that dotted the path. I even managed to capture a shot of the strange symbol etched into a rock near the trail. I made a mental note to research it when I got back to the hotel, hoping to unravel its meaning. I looked up, expecting to see the rest of the group ahead of me, but they were nowhere to be seen. I assumed they had simply moved on, their pace faster than mine. I quickened my steps, following the winding path, but I couldn't catch up with them. The silence around me was unnerving, broken only by the sound of my own footsteps. I called out to my parents, but my voice was swallowed by the stillness. There was no reply. I started to feel a prickle of fear, a sense of unease that quickly escalated into full-blown panic. Where was everyone? Where were my parents? I quickened my pace, my heart pounding in my chest, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps. I had to find them. I had to find them now. The path twisted and turned, climbing steadily upwards through the dense undergrowth. I called out again, my voice cracking with a mixture of fear and frustration. Mum? Dad? Dimitri? Anyone? The silence that answered me was absolute, a heavy blanket that muffled all sound, amplifying my growing panic. It was as if the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting. The air hung thick and still, the oppressive heat clinging to me like a damp cloth. Even the insects, usually a constant hum in the Mediterranean climate, were absent. It was a silence that felt unnatural, a silence that whispered of something wrong, something deeply unsettling. I tried to rationalize, telling myself that they must have just moved ahead, that they were probably just around the next bend. But a cold dread was creeping into my heart, a premonition that something terrible had happened. I quickened my pace, my footsteps echoing unnaturally loud in the oppressive quiet. I scanned the undergrowth, searching for any sign of the others, a discarded water bottle, a misplaced hat, anything. But there was nothing. The path was clear, almost too clear, as if no one had ever walked it before. As I rounded a sharp bend in the trail, I saw it again, the strange symbol etched into a large, flat rock beside the path. It was the same symbol I had seen at the hotel and at the ruins, a series of interconnected circles and lines that seemed to pulse with a strange, almost hypnotic energy. This time, I felt a compulsion to touch it, to trace its shape with my finger. As I did so, a jolt of static electricity seemed to pass through me, making the hairs on my arms stand on end. I recoiled, startled, and stared at the symbol, my mind racing. What did it mean? Why was it appearing in all these seemingly unconnected places? And why did it make me feel so uneasy? I took a deep breath, trying to compose myself. Panic would get me nowhere. I had to stay calm, think rationally. The others must be ahead, that was the only explanation. I forced myself to focus on the path, to put one foot in front of the other, to keep moving forward. But the silence, the oppressive, unnatural silence, was getting to me. It was a silence that seemed to press in on me, to suffocate me, to amplify the pounding of my heart in my ears. I continued to follow the path, my eyes constantly scanning the surroundings. I noticed something else strange. The footprints. They weren't human. They were long and narrow, with 3 distinct toes, and they were twisted in an unnatural way, as if the creature that had made them had been walking sideways or even backwards. And they were appearing where they shouldn't be, crossing over rocks and bushes, defying the laws of gravity. They were leading towards the waterfall. A wave of nausea washed over me. I didn't want to follow those footprints. I didn't want to know what kind of creature had made them. But I had no choice. My parents were gone, the others were gone, and the only clue I had was these strange, unsettling tracks. With a heavy heart and a growing sense of dread, I followed them. The path led me deeper into the forest, the trees growing taller and denser, their branches intertwining to form a dark canopy overhead. The air grew colder, the silence more profound. I felt as if I was being watched, as if unseen eyes were following my every move. I glanced nervously around, but there was nothing to see, only the trees, the rocks, and the strange footprints that led me onwards. As I approached the waterfall, I could hear a faint rushing sound. A sound that seemed to defy the silence that surrounded it. It was the sound of water, but it was different, somehow distorted, as if it was flowing backwards, against the natural order of things. My heart pounded in my chest as I rounded the final bend in the path, and saw the waterfall. It was wrong. Everything about it was wrong. The water, instead of cascading down in a graceful arc, flowed upwards, defying gravity, as if pulled by some unseen force. It shimmered and twisted in the air, forming a swirling vortex of water that seemed to reach towards the sky. The pool below, instead of reflecting the daylight, reflected a star-filled night sky, a sky that was impossibly clear and vibrant, even though it was the middle of the day. The air around the waterfall crackled with an unnatural energy, making the hairs on my arms stand on end. My phone, which had miraculously come back to life, flickered and died again, the screen displaying only static. I stared at the waterfall, my mind reeling, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. It was impossible, it was a violation of the laws of nature, it was a nightmare. And yet it was real. I could see it, I could feel it, the wrongness of it, the unnatural energy that emanated from it. I looked around, searching for any sign of my parents, of the others. But there was nothing. The area around the waterfall was eerily deserted, as if no one had ever been there. There were no footprints, no signs of human presence, only the twisted falls and the star-filled reflection in the pool below. It was as if the waterfall had always been like this, a place untouched by time, a place that existed outside of reality. A wave of pure terror washed over me. I had to get out of there, I had to escape this place, this nightmare. I turned and fled, retracing my steps along the path, my only thought to get back to the jeeps, to get back to the hotel, to get back to some semblance of normality. But even as I ran, I knew, deep down, that things would never be normal again. I had seen something that day, something that had shattered my perception of reality, something that had opened my eyes to a world beyond my understanding. And I knew, with a chilling certainty, that I would never be the same. The silence of the forest was even more oppressive now, amplified by my fear. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. I imagined unseen eyes watching me from the shadows, felt the presence of something ancient and malevolent lurking just beyond my perception. I called out for my parents again, my voice a desperate whisper in the vast emptiness. But there was no reply. They were gone. Lost. I didn't know where they were or what had happened to them, but I knew with a chilling certainty that I might never see them again. As I finally reached the clearing where we had parked the jeeps, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, the others had returned. Maybe I wasn't alone. But as I emerged from the trees, my heart sank. The clearing was deserted. The other jeeps were gone. Only one remained, our jeep, the one we had taken on the safari. Its engine was still running, a low, ominous hum that seemed to mock me. The driver's seat was empty. I approached the jeep cautiously, my senses on high alert. I half expected someone to jump out from behind it, but there was no one. The silence was unnerving, broken only by the idling engine. I reached out and touched the hood of the jeep. It was warm, indicating that it hadn't been sitting there for long. Where was everyone? Where was Dimitri? Where were my parents? I peered inside the jeep. The keys were in the ignition. On the dashboard I saw the radio. I reached out and turned it on, hoping to hear some news, some explanation. The radio crackled to life, and then I heard voices. Familiar voices. My parents. It was a recording of their conversation from earlier that morning, before the safari. They were laughing, talking about their plans for the week, mentioning a boat trip to Santorini, and a visit to the Knossos Palace. Their voices were light and carefree, filled with the joy of their anniversary trip. It was a normal conversation, a happy conversation, a conversation that now sounded chillingly distant, like a relic from a different life. I listened to their voices, tears welling up in my eyes. It was like hearing from them again, a brief, fleeting moment of connection in the midst of the nightmare. But the recording only amplified my pain, my sense of loss. They were gone, and all I had left were these echoes of their past. I turned off the radio, unable to listen anymore. The silence returned, heavier than before. I felt a wave of despair wash over me. I was alone, stranded in this desolate place, with no idea what to do. I looked around the clearing, searching for any clue, any sign of where the others had gone, but there was nothing. The only thing that stood out was the strange symbol etched into the dusty hood of our jeep, the same symbol I had seen at the hotel, at the ruins, and on the rock near the trail. It was as if it was following me, a constant reminder of the strange, unsettling events that were unfolding. I climbed into the driver's seat, my hands trembling. I didn't know how to drive, I had never even tried. But I had no choice. I had to get out of there. I had to get back to the hotel. I turned the key in the ignition, and the engine roared to life. I fumbled with the gears, managing to put the Jeep into drive. I pressed down on the accelerator, and the Jeep lurched forward, bumping and swaying along the rough track. The drive back to the hotel was a blur. I drove as fast as I could, my eyes fixed on the road, my mind racing with thoughts of my parents, of the waterfall, of the strange symbol. I didn't know what was happening, I didn't understand any of it. All I knew was that I had to get back to the hotel, back to somewhere familiar, somewhere safe. As I approached the resort, I could see it in the distance, the white buildings gleaming in the afternoon sun. But as I got closer, I noticed something was wrong. The resort was silent. There were no people by the pool, no music playing, no signs of life. It was as if the entire place had been abandoned. I drove through the gates, my heart pounding in my chest. The resort was deserted. The once bustling lobby was empty, the reception desk unmanned. The restaurants were closed, the tables set, but no one there to eat. The pool was still and silent, the water reflecting the empty sky. It was a ghost town. I parked the Jeep in front of the hotel and got out, my legs shaky. I walked into the lobby, calling out for anyone, but there was no answer. The silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of my own footsteps. I wandered through the deserted corridors, searching for any sign of life, but there was nothing. The hotel, once so vibrant and full of life, was now a tomb. I reached the reception desk and saw a single envelope lying on the counter. It was addressed to me. My name was written on it in neat, precise letters. I picked it up and opened it. Inside there was a single item, a ferry ticket. It was a one-way ticket, departing that evening. My name was printed on it, along with a destination I didn't recognize. I stared at the ticket, my mind numb. What did it mean? Where was I supposed to go? I looked out the window and saw our Jeep parked in the driveway. The engine was still running. It was waiting for me, and then I heard it. The radio crackled to life again. This time, it wasn't my parents' voices, it was mine. "If you're hearing this," my own voice said, "it's already too late." The words hung there, suspended in the silence, heavy with an unspoken dread. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the backdrop of the abandoned resort. I felt a coldness creeping over me, a numbness that threatened to consume me entirely. "It's already too late." The phrase repeated in my mind, a haunting refrain that seemed to resonate with the emptiness around me. I stood frozen, the ferry ticket clutched tightly in my hand, my gaze fixed on the radio. The voice, my voice, sounded distorted, unnatural, as if it had been recorded a long time ago, or perhaps in some other place, some other reality. It was me, yet not me, a ghostly echo of myself. The words themselves were cryptic, ominous. Too late for what? Too late to escape? Too late to find my parents? Too late to understand what was happening? I glanced around the lobby, my eyes scanning the deserted space, searching for any clue, any explanation, but there was nothing. The once vibrant space was now a tomb, a monument to some unknown tragedy. The reception desk stood empty, the computer screens dark, the brochures scattered haphazardly. The comfortable armchairs were vacant, the magazines untouched. It was as if time had stopped, or perhaps had been rewound, leaving behind only the ghostly remnants of a life that had once been. I walked over to the window and looked out at the resort. The pool was still, the sun loungers empty, the bars deserted. The palm trees swayed gently in the breeze, their fronds rustling like whispers, adding to the eerie silence. The once bustling resort was now a ghost town, a chilling reminder of the fleeting nature of happiness, the fragility of life. My gaze fell on the Jeep parked in the driveway. The engine was still running, a low, throbbing hum that seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy. It was waiting for me. The ferry ticket in my hand felt heavy, a physical weight that mirrored the burden of the unknown that pressed down on me. Where was I supposed to go? The destination printed on the ticket was unfamiliar, a place I'd never heard of. Was it an escape? Or was it a trap? I turned back to the radio, hoping for some further message, some clarification. But the radio was silent now, the only sound the low hum of the Jeep engine outside. I reached out and touched the dial, turning it off. The silence that followed was even more profound, a silence that seemed to press in on me, to suffocate me. I walked out of the hotel and towards the Jeep, my footsteps echoing eerily in the deserted driveway. As I approached the vehicle, I hesitated, my hand hovering over the door handle. Should I get in? Should I follow the instructions on the ticket, whatever they might be? Or should I try to find another way out, another way to understand what had happened? I looked in the side mirror of the Jeep and saw my reflection. My face was pale, my eyes wide with fear and confusion. I looked like a ghost myself, a shadow of my former self. And then I saw them. Behind me in the reflection, I saw my parents. They were standing just behind me, their faces serene, their eyes fixed on me. They were smiling. It was the same smile they had worn on the first day of our holiday, the same smile they had worn in the recording on the radio. But now, the smile seemed different, distant, almost vacant. It was a smile that didn't reach their eyes, a smile that held no warmth, no love. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. I knew that if I did, I would see something that I didn't want to see, something that would shatter the last vestiges of hope that I still clung to. I knew that the parents I saw in the reflection were not the parents I knew, not the parents I loved. They were something else, something other. The radio crackled to life again, and my own voice, distorted and unnatural, filled the air. "If you're hearing this, it's already too late," it repeated, the words echoing in my mind, a chilling mantra. I closed my eyes, trying to block out the voice, trying to block out the image of my parents in the reflection. But it was no use. The voice was inside my head, the image was burned into my memory. I opened my eyes and looked at the ferry ticket in my hand. The destination printed on it was still unfamiliar, a place I'd never heard of. But now, it seemed like the only option, the only way out of this nightmare. I looked at the Jeep, its engine still running, waiting for me. And then I looked back at the reflection, at my parents, their smiles still fixed, their eyes still vacant. I had a choice to make, a choice between the known and the unknown, between the familiar and the alien, between the past and the future. A choice between staying and going, a choice between hope and despair. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my trembling hands. I looked at the ferry ticket again, then at the Jeep. The radio crackled one last time, my distorted voice whispering, "It's already too late." I reached out and touched the door handle of the Jeep. The hum of the engine, once a distant drone, now vibrated through my hand, a physical manifestation of the choice I was about to make. "It's already too late." My voice, a ghostly echo from the radio, whispered in my ear, a chilling premonition that clung to me like a shroud. I glanced one last time at the reflection in the side mirror. My parents stood there, their smiles unwavering, their eyes vacant. They were so close, yet so far, lost to me in some way I couldn't comprehend. The sight of them, frozen in that perpetual, unsettling smile, sent a shiver down my spine. It was a smile that promised nothing good, a smile that hinted at something terrible, something irreversible. I knew, with a chilling certainty that settled deep in my bones, that turning back was not an option. The hotel, once a symbol of luxury and relaxation, was now a tomb, a monument to a vanished life. The familiar comfort of the resort had been replaced by an oppressive silence, a silence that spoke of something profoundly wrong. And the ferry ticket, clutched tightly in my other hand, beckoned me towards the unknown, a promise, or perhaps a threat, of something different, something beyond the reality I had known. I pulled the door open and slid into the driver's seat. The interior of the Jeep was familiar, yet it felt alien, tainted by the events of the day. The dust on the dashboard, the worn fabric of the seats, the faint scent of gasoline. All these details, once unremarkable, now seemed charged with a sinister significance. I looked at the ferry ticket again, the unfamiliar destination printed in bold letters. Aegina. I had never heard of it. Was it a real place? Or was it a figment of some twisted imagination, a destination leading me further into the heart of the nightmare? I started the engine, the sound a jarring intrusion on the silence of the deserted resort. The Jeep lurched forward as I pulled away, the tires crunching on the gravel of the driveway. I didn't look back at the hotel, at the reflection in the mirror. I couldn't. I had made my choice, and now I had to face the consequences, whatever they might be. The drive to the port was uneventful, in a way that felt deeply unsettling. The roads were empty, the towns I passed through silent and deserted like the resort. It was as if I was the only person left in this strange, empty world. The sun was beginning to set, casting long, eerie shadows across the landscape. The sky was a canvas of deep oranges and reds, a beautiful yet ominous backdrop to my flight into the unknown. As I reached the port, I saw the ferry waiting at the dock. It was an old rusty vessel, its paint peeling, its lights flickering. It looked like it belonged in another era, a relic of a bygone time. There were a few other passengers waiting on the dock, their faces pale and drawn, their eyes filled with a quiet desperation. They didn't speak to each other. They didn't speak to me. They simply stood there, waiting, like figures in a dream. I parked the Jeep and walked towards the ferry, my footsteps echoing on the empty dock. I showed my ticket to the lone crew member standing at the gangplank. He barely glanced at it, his eyes fixed on some distant point. He nodded curtly and gestured for me to board. As I walked up the gangplank, I looked back at the shore. The lights of the port were twinkling in the distance, like tiny stars in the vast darkness. Crete, the island of sun and myths, was fading into the night, taking with it the memories of my holiday, the laughter of my parents, the beauty of the landscape. It was a chapter closed, a chapter that would forever haunt me. The ferry horn sounded, a mournful blast that echoed across the water. The engines rumbled to life, and the vessel began to move, slowly pulling away from the dock. I stood at the railing, watching as Crete receded into the distance, disappearing into the darkness. The island, with its secrets and its mysteries, was now just a silhouette against the night sky. As the ferry sailed into the open sea, I felt a strange sense of detachment, as if I was floating between two worlds, between the reality I had known and the unknown that lay ahead. The other passengers remained silent, their faces illuminated by the flickering lights of the ferry. They were all strangers, bound together by a shared sense of unease, a shared journey into the unknown. I looked up at the night sky, which was now filled with stars, a vast expanse of twinkling lights that stretched out endlessly. The stars seemed to mock me with their indifference, their distant, cold beauty. They had witnessed countless tragedies, countless disappearances, countless stories of loss and despair. And they would witness mine. The ferry continued its journey, cutting through the dark waters, heading towards Aegina, a place I knew nothing about. I had no idea what awaited me there, what dangers lurked in the shadows, what secrets lay hidden beneath the surface. But I knew one thing: my life had changed forever. The events of the past few days had shattered my perception of reality, had opened my eyes to a world beyond my understanding, and I knew with a chilling certainty that I would never be the same. As the ferry approached Aegina, I saw the lights of the island twinkling in the distance, like a beacon in the darkness. It was a small island, much smaller than Crete, its silhouette barely visible against the horizon. As the ferry docked, I felt a sense of trepidation, a feeling of unease that settled deep in my stomach. What awaited me on this island? What secrets did it hold? What was the meaning of the ferry ticket, the message on the radio, the smiles on my parents' faces? I disembarked from the ferry, my feet touching the unfamiliar ground of Aegina. The air was still and silent, the only sound the gentle lapping of the waves against the shore. The other passengers disembarked as well, their faces pale and drawn, their eyes filled with a quiet desperation. They dispersed quickly, disappearing into the darkness, leaving me alone on the deserted dock. I looked around, trying to get my bearings. The port was small and quiet, with a few fishing boats bobbing gently in the water. There were a few buildings clustered around the harbor, their lights dim and flickering. The island seemed deserted, abandoned, just like the resort, just like the towns I had passed on the way to the port. I walked towards the nearest building, a small taverna with a single light burning in the window. I pushed open the door and stepped inside. The taverna was empty, except for an old man sitting behind the counter, his face etched with wrinkles, his eyes filled with a deep sadness. He looked up as I entered, his gaze lingering on me for a moment before he looked away. I approached the counter and asked him about the island, about the people who lived there. He shrugged, his expression unchanging. "They are gone," he said, his voice raspy, barely audible. "Gone where?" I asked. He shrugged again. "Gone," he repeated, "like the others." "The others?" I asked. He nodded. "All gone," he said. "No one left." I stared at him, my mind reeling. What did he mean? Gone where? Like the others? Was he talking about my parents? About the other tourists at the resort? About everyone? The old man didn't elaborate. He simply sat there, his gaze fixed on some distant point, his face filled with a deep, unshakable sadness. I asked him about the ferry, about where it had come from. He shrugged again. It comes and goes, he said. No one knows where it comes from. No one knows where it goes. I felt a chill run down my spine. The old man's words were cryptic, unsettling. They hinted at something terrible, something beyond my comprehension. I asked him about Aegina, about its history, about its people. He shrugged again. It is an old place, he said. A forgotten place, a place where things disappear. Disappear? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He nodded. People, things, memories, all disappear. Aegina, it takes everything. I stared at him, my heart pounding in my chest. Aegina, it takes everything. The words echoed in my mind, a chilling premonition. I had come to this island seeking answers, seeking escape. But now I felt trapped, caught in a web of mystery and dread. I had a feeling that Aegina was not a destination but a final resting place. A place where things disappear. And I had a feeling that I was about to disappear too.